the December 9 meeting of the Woodstock Town Board, and we will go to public hearing.
What happened to public hearing? I'm assuming it must be Michael?
Mr. Mayor, it's a short change in that. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is, I know Mr. Wank doesn't like the word thank you, but thank you nonetheless. My name is Michael Freeman Jeremy Peka, the Polish derivation of Woodstock. My father served honorably in the U.S. Air Force, my mother in the Air Force, 80 immediate members of my family in the U.S. military, I in the Marine Corps. The nation seems to be in the throes of hypervigilance, mistrust, and overreaction. My sympathies to the family of Eric Gardner. I wish to impact the recent importance of the work of U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder in his findings of repeated police misconduct, and know of New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman and his calls for a New York investigation into police activities. As a former election inspector, I, Michael Freeman Jeremy Peka, was chokeholded into injury right here in Woodstock, New York by police officers on April of 2007. I, Michael Freeman Jeremy Peka, must testify before this town board of the ongoing need to ferret out criminals who wear cop uniforms and who then merit out police brutality. My father is the artist who did the bald eagle illustration for the '74 American Legion magazine front cover. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Eric,
Good evening, everyone. I've sent a letter to everyone on the board and a clarification thereof. And I want to kind of summarize that letter in 2 minutes on the record. It's entitled Revisioning Woodstock's Water Supply. I'm happy with the general action against Niagara bottling that's been going on in both Woodstock and Kingston. But I disagree with Don Gregorius and others who have stated that the object is to get a seat at the table. The object is to stop the project. And now we have an attorney coming on board, and I suggest to the board that we make use of the attorney by directing him in what seems to be the only possible direction to really stop the project. And ask him if he can confirm on reading the 1929 agreement between Kingston and the DEC, water supply application number 493, which clearly states that Woodstock has a superior right over the people of Kingston to the Mink Hollow water. And if that is the case, then I think that we as a town need to take a long-term view of our water needs. Over the next 100 years, the population is going to grow, the planet's going to get warmer, and we're going to need to water our gardens. We need more water than we have now. God forbid Jay has missed one oil tank in the aquifer, you know, over the aquifer, and one leaks into the Bearsville Flats aquifer, and we have no water. God forbid. We have a Mink Hollow watershed, which we have been sharing with the people of Kingston now for 90, 100 years. It's been very generous of us. Now it's time to take our superior claim and have some kind of committee examine what it would take to tap into that water and use it for our own needs. The point is to make a declaration of intention to Judith Hansen in this period of time while Niagara is making their decisions. Because once there's a superior claim on X hundreds of millions of gallons a day of that water, they will step back and reconsider and look somewhere else for their water, for their bottling. Thank you very much.
Hope so. Okay. Let me just respond to that. The actual wording in the decision in 1929 is that nothing in this decision shall be construed to mean that the city of Kingston's rights to the water shall be superior to the rights of the local inhabitants. That's how it reads. That's number one. Number two, in that same decision, it says that the town of Woodstock shall retain the right to tap into those waters above or below the intake at any time that it wishes. Now, of course, when you tap into a state-regulated stream, you don't just tap into it. You go through a permitting process. If the town of Woodstock in the future were to decide that they needed those waters, under the 1929 decision, you have absolute right to tap into it above or below the intake. One thing that should be considered if the town would ever make that decision is that because it's surface water, it must be filtered. So you would have to build a multi-million-dollar filtration plant, and you would have to stop it 24/7 in order to maintain the potability of that water. But that right has not been diminished.
That's correct. Can I just add one thing? The point is that we can look at that, we can take lots of time to discuss all those issues and the expenses and whether the town is willing to cover the expense and do we really need a filtration plant. That might take years. So this can be letters back and forth between Niagara's attorneys and Quigley's attorneys and Mr. Baker, and they can do that for a few years, and Niagara will pull back very quickly. We don't have to build a filtration plant, is the point. We just have to be looking at building a filtration plant.
Okay. Any announcements?
I apologize for being late. It's very icy up on the top of the mountain.
Is it icy up there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Time for you to move out.
Shall we proceed to resolutions?
Yes.
You resolve to amend resolution, Jackie, you just have to put the number in there.
I did, it's 245.
245-14, dated November 25, 2014, to read, resolving the total contract prices shall be as follows: one-way construction, $904,194, CD electric, and here's the correction, $261,310. Jim Taylor Plumbing and Heating, $152,142, and Condor Fire Sprinkler LLC, $58,800. Okay.
Can you explain what the changes were?
The change was, in the CDE electric, they used, what are the two figures? There's the final price, and then there was the one before. If you see the breakdown in the prices, they used the wrong column. It's about a $3,700 difference, I believe.
So it's just a correction?
It's just a correction, yeah, that's all it is. All in favor?
Well, what about the other ones?
They're the same.
There's corrections?
Those are just the same.
The only one is the one that's underlined.
That's underlined.
Has there been any information yet about the change in the water heaters?
They're working on it.
They're doing that now.
Good. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Be resolved to authorize the supervisor to sign extra work order number 14 for 2015, monitoring of the closed landfill, Harbor Associate Project 10982, fee not to exceed $8,000. All in favor?
Aye.
Be resolved to authorize the supervisor to sign the Ulster County Task Force Agreement for the year 2015 relating to the enforcement of the Stop DWI program. All in favor?
Aye.
Be it resolved the holiday celebration of December 24, 2014, including the use of the village green and the Woodstock Town Hall beginning at approximately 3:30 p.m. and ending at approximately 7:30 p.m. be permitted by the town in accordance with the plan by the Town Safety Committee. In favor?
Aye.
Be resolved to authorize the supervisor to sign a municipal advisor services agreement with Unistat for the sale of a $1.1 million bond to finance the Westville Home Deck Community Center project, fee not to exceed $6,500.
Now, is this the bond anticipation note?
No, this is going to be a bond. And I'm glad you asked, because yes, that was, the original plan was first to ban and then to bond. But in conversations with our advisor, it is felt that if we wait a year to serialize, that the interest rates are only going to go up, up, up. For instance, that bond for the town hall, which was at 2.78, this bond is probably going to be in excess of 3%. And the fear is that if we wait a year to serialize, that it will push even, beyond what we can expect now.
Yeah, okay.
So this gives us some cushion to meet unanticipated circumstances. In conversations with the clerk of the works, we feel that this is enough cushion and not too much, and where to go. In favor?
Aye.
Be it resolved to authorize the town clerk to place an ad in the town's official newspaper seeking candidates to fill vacancies in the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, the Woodstock Environmental Commission, the Woodstock Board of Assessment and Review, the Como Stewardship Advisory Committee, and the Woodstock Ethics Board.
Second.
All in favor?
Is
I'm sorry.
the tree commission filled?
Every year, at the end of every year.
We didn't
vote
put
that.
terms on the tree commission.
No, but, do we have I think we said there's gonna be 5 people on it. Are there 5 full
There's
members?
4.
Oh, well, throw the tree commission in there too.
Maybe we can take out the board of assessment review and put the tree committee, because the assessment review was filled. They fill in September.
No, but there's a vacancy that was due, they,
Didn't the vacancy come due in September?
yeah,
filled it.
but we haven't filled it.
Yeah,
We
we
did?
did. We agreed to have,
Jim, we renewed him already?
I think we did.
yes,
Jim,
you
am
have
I
to,
correct?
yes.
Yeah,
I'll check that, but
I think we have that resolution.
Well, so if we did, we'll just
I'll
strike
take
that.
it out,
from
we'll
the-
put the tree, but you want tree committee in.
If it's only got 4 members, you're supposed to have 5, then it's probably worth it.
Is anyone
Okay.
actually leaving the planning board, or is it just the terms of the?
Terms are up.
John's term was up, wasn't reappointed. John.
Lavelle.
Yeah. That's the truth with all these.
No, I know, I just wondered if anyone was.
You never know, it's not the end of the year yet.
Did we vote, all in
No.
favor?
Aye.
Whereas for, well, Jay, you put this together, why don't you, read it?
Whereas 4 communities in Ulster County are opposed to the Pilgrim pipeline going through their townships, and whereas there are at least 24 communities in other counties concerned with the dangers from potential leaks, fires, and explosions, and whereas many of these communities haven't the infrastructure nor adequately staffed emergency services to respond to disasters of such potential magnitude, therefore, be it resolved, the Woodstock Town Board supports communities opposed to the Pilgrim Pipeline and directs the Woodstock Town Clerk to forward this resolution to the New York State Thruway Authority Chairman Howard P. Milstein, New York State Department of Transportation Commissioner Joan McDonald, USPHMSA Administrator Cynthia L. Waterman, U.S. Senator Charles Schumer, U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, U.S. Representative Chris Christie, Governor Andrew Cuomo, New York Assemblyman Kevin Cahill, New York Senator John Bonachek, New York State DEC Commissioner Joseph Martins, and Ulster County Executive Michael Hine.
I would just add to that, New York State Senator Cecilia Patrick, and I realize that she's only going to be there for 3 more weeks, but perhaps her successor will pick up the correspondence. Any discussion? Oh, come on, somebody's got to ask me, what is the USPHMSA?
All right.
Come on, what is it?
What is that?
Come on.
What's the
What is it?
USPHMSA?
Oh, it's funny you should ask.
Pipeline hazardous
It is the
materials.
United States Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. How's that? I wonder how I knew that. All in favor?
Well, who seconded it?
Jeremy.
Yes, I say.
I'm abstaining. And I do have to say for the record, I'm a little perturbed that this is on the agenda tonight, because we did have an agreement, and I know from time to time, things can't be helped. A resolution like this should have been circulated prior to the meeting.
Well, you're right, Bill.
And all I know about this is what I read in the paper, so it's probably all incorrect anyway.
I'll abstain also, somewhat for the same reason of Bill, but I just don't understand this issue to feel like
Well-
I should make a statement.
will just relate to the conversation I had with one of our sister towns, the supervisor, Jean Walsh, Rosenberg. And this was her point. She said, you know, it's true, they come down, it comes down the river in barges and it comes down the railroad. And if something were to happen in those cases, you would have an emergency response team that could go and, fix it and clean it up and put out the fires and whatever else. But if you were to have a mishap with a pipeline, you would have no way of knowing until potentially it's too late. And this is apparently a very flammable and very explosive material that they are proposing to shove down this pipeline. And it is, according to her anyway, and these were people who came to her public meeting to state as such, the company that is pushing this and who are going door to door to properties where the proposed pipeline will run through are not just asking people for their permission to tear up their properties and put in this pipeline, but in some cases where they're not met with acquiescence, intimidating. And so there's just, sort of a bad taste in everybody's mouth about how this whole thing is proceeding. But Bill and Ken, I do understand your points.
Also, I'd like to add, particularly Bill, I didn't get a request for this until yesterday.
Okay.
And
I'll forgive
I
you.
have, pardon?
I forgive.
Well, I also wanted to say that I have a new computer, which I don't understand, and I've lost all of my email addresses. And I called Jackie this morning and asked her for her email so I could send it to her, and she disseminated it.
You guys got it from me, right?
Yeah.
I did have it when I got home this afternoon.
Yeah,
And also, for anybody that's interested, my new email is jaywenk1@gmail.com.
Oh, that's why you were blocked.
But,
Yeah, your email was blocked on my email
yeah,
tonight.
yeah.
And all right, that's why I have that.
well, even though I didn't know about this, I'm so opposed to the pipeline that I'm definitely voting to do this.
So the hell with McKenna.
Well, I normally get really annoyed at not knowing ahead of time, but this is annoying, this whole pipeline thing is powerful.
Yeah, can I ask a question? I guess I'm not aware. From where to where are they trying to put in the pipeline? And is it going to be underground or above ground?
It's from Albany to a refinery in New Jersey.
Oh, my goodness.
It will follow, for the most part, I'm told, along the side of the New York State Thruway. But there may be areas where that may not be feasible, and so it won't necessarily just be in a straight beeline down the Thruway and into New Jersey. But that is the ultimate destination of this pipeline, and that's where the trains and the barges now currently go, to a refinery in New Jersey.
And it's going to be a two-way pipeline.
Yes, yeah.
And was the idea it's going to be underground or above ground?
Underground. Okay, so we will now go to a discussion of the proposed local law creating an aquifer protection overlay district. Jay, this was something that you were sort of pushing down the road here, if you want to make any opening comments.
Did you guys actually vote on that?
Yes, we actually voted. I think
So you
that's
voted
pretty
for
high.
it. I heard two abstentions, but I didn't hear it.
You voted to pass it in the local law?
Did
No,
you?
no,
No.
Oh, the pipeline, oh, I passed, you already on the
Yes, we
next
passed the
sub-
law.
the next
Go get a
subject.
new zoning book.
No public hearing, nothing.
Yeah, what's going
But
on?
do you need three? I think you
We
said-
decided to streamline the
Was it
process.
And you didn't even get my comments yet.
Three with two
abstentions.
Oh, 3 to 2, yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So, this local law is a draft. It was originally put forward by the board in 2007,
Correct.
but never enacted, never sent a copy to the state or put into effect. And so after having gotten the oil tanks, spare oil tanks cleaned up, this to me is the next step. And as a draft, my interest primarily tonight is developing input, nay and yay and questions and so forth. Does everybody in the public have a copy?
Yep.
Yeah,
Did you get one, Ned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Personally, I find several aspects of this a little troubling.
Hey Jay, you started to talk about this a year or two ago, a while back. Is this hasn't been changed at all since then, right?
What's been changed about it is the draft that was circulating a year ago was still templated on the old zoning law.
So no words have changed though? The wording hasn't been changed?
I don't, not as I remember reading it.
Very minor, if at all.
Well, aren't you gonna put stuff in about the oil tanks?
I guess what I'm getting at, you and I talked about possible adjustments, none of that.
Everyone has talked about it.
But anything you and I talked about was not put in.
No.
Okay.
No, this is it, and it's all.
Okay.
I have a couple of observations about it on page 3, after section 260-40A, 1 and C and 1 and D. I have a question, who will oversee
Hold on,
these
Mitch.
criteria?
What version of this are you looking at?
I'm sorry?
What version of this are you looking at?
The one that you got.
The one that was in the,
Let me see what you got there, Ron.
I don't have pages on that.
no, we don't have pages on it either, just go to the third page.
That looks,
And go to 240,
well,
240,
260-40,
264. Letter
A.
Where's your first page?
this is the page I'm looking at right now.
I'll make him a copy of this so that it's part of all.
Here, use this. Take this.
Fine.
I've got it.
I need to hold my notes.
Yeah, I know. I'll give it back.
That's it, yeah.
Well, this, the copy that I have is that which I forwarded to you.
I don't know, well, this, I printed out what you forwarded me.
Uh-huh.
It's different. But anyway, I'll be able to follow.
Okay. We go ahead?
Continue.
Yeah. There are several sections here that, for instance, located and designed in such a manner that it would not have a significant adverse impact on groundwater resources that may supply future public water supply wells. There are a couple of different things which I don't think we need to go into, but just generally, we need to define who or which body will oversee these criteria and
Planning
make sure
board.
that they're
It'd be
maintained.
the planning board, because this would all go
I
to a
know.
special use permit.
But then the
But
building
I
inspector
think
would.
that something with that language, because the planning board may possibly, I don't wanna run them down, but they may possibly fulfill the paperwork, and it could be overseen that, or rather a lack of overseeing any future developments. I'm not sure how the planning board could deal with that. That's why I made those notes.
But once the planning board issues its findings, the building inspector would make sure that they were followed.
Well, then I think in relation to my view that we have to establish a schedule for that sort of thing.
What do
It
you
may
have to
be,
hold on? What do you mean by
maybe
schedule?
it's once a year,
Well-
maybe, but I think that overseeing should be scheduled. We don't want to leave it to chance.
What?
I'm sorry, well, the planning board is not enforcement. When you say overseeing, the planning board reviews cases. The planning board considers those cases in light of the law, and the planning board does make a finding, whether they're approved, unapproved, improved with conditions. And those things, once we've taken our stand, it does go to the building department, it goes to the building inspector, and that's where the oversight is. There are cases all the time where the planning board takes a position and then passes it along, and every now and then they feel like taking an action because maybe something wasn't followed perfectly, but the answer is, we're not enforcement, we're not the enforcement arm.
Exactly,
So,
which is exactly what the point that Bill made. And all I'm saying is that there should be some scheduling.
for the review by the building inspector.
Exactly.
But why this case and why not other cases? I'm not sure if for other categories of items where we take a position and the building inspector then is responsible to see it carried through.
Well, there are other aspects in this proposed law that will need some oversight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
For instance, outdoor parking of vehicles. Now, many people in the APO area park their vehicles outdoors. Some have garages, maybe perhaps all of them, I haven't counted that. But many people leave their vehicles outside at night. To my recollection, because I have looked carefully, most everybody's driveway is impermeable, concrete or macadam. And any possible drips or leaks will be carried to the town sewer. But wherever there may be a permeable surface, that could be developed into a problem. Now, it could be a very small problem with one or two or three property owners. It could be a different degree of problem if there is a commercial entity that parks a lot of vehicles outside. And so, without having any finality in my observation now, I'm thinking that we should consider, along with this, a schedule for inspection, for making sure that everything is staying up to date. That's all I intended to say about that.
So the building inspector does do a yearly inspection on their businesses, right? In town?
For their annual operating permits.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that could be added in as an additional line on that process.
Yeah.
Well, the other question I have is every now and then we have prohibited uses in some parts, some of the districts in town. And what you just mentioned is what if you had a business that had a lot of cars and vehicles, which you could have a lot of seepage over the aquifer, perhaps that should be a prohibited use for the parts of for the districts that are over the aquifer. I mean, maybe that's something else that would solve your concern.
Well, it's definitely something that we need to talk about. Yeah. As I said, there are some number of private vehicles that are parked outdoors. How many they may add up to, I don't know. I haven't counted that. There may be, a commercial establishment that wants to park a number of vehicles outside. I don't want to be in a position of saying no to a commercial establishment that wants to park vehicles outside when we have private vehicles functioning that way. And I think that we have to come to some kind of agreement about it that will protect the aquifer. That's the purpose of this. And I'm just saying that we've got some bumps and so forth to understand and clarify. There's a couple of places here, section 260-40B, A1A, B1B, B1C, that frankly, I don't understand the language. For instance, in section 260-40B1B, any proposed use or activity that is subject to the requirements for a special use permit in the APO district that will pump a total of more than a daily average of 1,000 gallons of groundwater shall not decrease the projected aquifer saturated thickness at the project boundary by more than 10% of the estimated pre-pumping aquifer saturated thickness of the site. Now, if I were in police custody and asked to sign that statement, I would be screaming for a lawyer. Ron, are you available?
All about to start screaming right now, Jay, because
Personally, I don't understand what that means. And there are several other sections where that I'm sure could be translated into English
Jay,
or American.
is it okay if I jump in now?
No, it's not okay. Of course. Please.
I think before you get to that subsection, you can start with the opening provision, which is very overly broad. This proposal is a template that doesn't work in Woodstock and in that district. You were just talking about the parking of cars and having someone going around and trying to enforce whether or not cars are parked on pervious or impervious parts of this section of the town. That's ridiculous. First of all, cars have been parking over there for decades and decades without any issues to the aquifer whatsoever. You look at the Gypsy Wolf restaurant, for example, which has a non-pervious parking lot. Cars are parked there every night. It's crowded every night. There's never been any impact whatsoever on the aquifer. And to think that the town is now going to enforce an aspect of a proposed law like that is really ludicrous. The town struggles to enforce any of its zoning laws at this point. We have a single zoning enforcement officer who's overwhelmed, and this would never be enforced. We'd have to have additional employees, and plus it would put every business in the light industrial district out of business. This proposal basically locks down the ability of any of those companies to operate, to make improvements in the future. I understand the intent might be good. You know, when you say the word water, aquifer, and protection in the same sentence, everybody pays attention because it sounds great. But the reality is that that area of the town was developed 100 years ago and more. And over the last 6, 7 decades, it's been developed with residences, with factories, with a restaurant, and there's been no issues with respect to the aquifer. And the other thing that's problematic with this proposal is that this makes a clear distinction between the obligations of commercial businesses and residences. And there's no science behind that. So in other words, a residential property owner can lay fertilizer down, but you can't if you're a commercial business. A residential property owner can expand their homes and do other things, but a commercial business can't. Which makes no sense because some of the activities of a residential property owner can be much more onerous than some of the businesses who might be owned by more responsible parties than the individual homeowners. I think, you know, just the opening sequence of the proposal talks about that this would require any activities which would include but not be limited to clearing of land, clearing or removal of vegetation, construction, demolition, excavation, filling, grading, earth moving, paving, drilling, or other development activities, including subdivisions. And this would be thrown in the lap of the planning board to try to oversee a law that's way beyond its scope. And I think one other thing that really should be pointed out, because, by the way, we all want to protect the water in the aquifer, the water everywhere. We already have a wetlands law in the town of Woodstock, which is very, very weakly enforced at this point in time. And to add more layers of legislation on top of that, that can't be enforced, doesn't make sense unless it's really needed and it's thought out clearly, and that the legislation is properly worded so that the town and the planning board, who would have to implement this law, could act on it intelligently. And we'd avoid a lot of the controversy that the town seems to get itself into from time to time with respect to confusion over the existing zoning law, which needs improvement. So, you know, although I think the intent is good, if we walk through this thing, it's not really possible to implement this. First of all, who decides what the baseline of these activities are? I don't think the planning board's qualified to do that.
Okay, I need to speak up. I'm on the planning board.
I know you are.
Yes,
How are
okay.
you?
But because when the planning board hits a complex issue, we do bring in a professional planner and get professional guidance.
Well-
So our method of dealing with something that was complex is, so it's not that we can't handle it, we handle it by bringing in a professional who gives us guidance on the critical issues. So I don't believe we couldn't handle it, but we would probably call in a planner to make sure we did it right.
Well, first of all, you already have the right to do that. As you know, I've been before the planning board.
Yes.
With respect to a recent project, the development in that area that's occurring right now, which the planning board approved. And you put us through sufficient scrutiny. We went through an EAF process and so on and so forth. This proposal here, if you actually read it and understand it, would require any renovation of any property in the light industrial district to have to spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on experts, if you actually read this thing. What I'm saying is, and I support Ms. Ricci's point, is that the current laws are sufficient to protect the aquifer district right now. We have sufficient laws. If you actually look at what's required in terms of site plan approval, and so on and so forth, there is substantial protection already in place. What I would propose, rather than enacting an entire new piece of legislation of this magnitude, and this really would have to be completely reworked, I don't even think this is worth marking up, because I think it's fundamentally unsound in terms of it ever being implemented appropriately. I think what might be a better direction for the board is to consider specific possible additions to the existing zoning law, rather than an entirely new chapter and overlay district. It also defeats the purpose of the light industrial district, which is located within the proposed aquifer overlay district. So there's a complete clash of purposes between the two districts.
Okay, well, first, I'm not yet prepared to agree that this whole thing is ridiculous. And I do believe, I do know that the reason for my reintroducing this is to get comment and to see how this can be improved. I think that there are several aspects that need improvement. And I would not agree to dump this off on the planning board before the town board has come to a sensible understanding of possible changes or deletions or whatever. So I'm not abandoning it right now as you're suggesting.
I wouldn't expect you to, based on my suggestions. That'd be foolhardy of me. But what I'm saying is that if you really look at this and you understand it within the context of the existing zoning law, this particular proposal is completely overbroad. It puts, it unfairly puts much heavier burden on commercial property owners than residential property owners, and there's no science to back that up. Because if you're going to protect the aquifer, then everybody's in it together. Everybody gets treated the same. You can't draw a distinction between activities of a residential property owner and a commercial property owner. That just makes no sense. And the other thing, Jay, is also a lot of these protections are already provided under state and federal law. You have provisions in there that have to do with the removal of hazardous substances. And I'm not even saying anybody's using hazardous substances. But all of those provisions in here about hazmats are very substantially covered under state law. which would supersede Woodstock law anyway, if there was ever an occurrence like
Well,
this.
would state law allow, permit a funeral parlor in that district?
Well, that has to do with usage that's at the town zoning level.
Yeah.
And you can definitely touch upon what uses are permitted and not permitted. But that's different than having a law that, for example, if the owner of the IPA building wanted to renovate that building, he'd really have to go through the ringer according to this. He would have to be hiring scientists, experts and everything else just to renovate his building. And there's no connection between the renovation of one of these buildings and its impact on the aquifer.
The only place that I recall where an expert is required is for a hydrogeologist. I don't remember the section, but that's the only time when I've gone through this.
No, it gives the planning board the authority to require multiple potential experts to come in, which would have to be paid for by the applicant. In other words, I think the burden now is sufficient. If you want to do something in that district now, you would have to go before the planning board for site plan review. And if you look at the site plan review requirements under the existing zoning law, they're pretty substantial. In many cases, you have to provide an EAF. They deal with drainage, sewerage, all types of things. And to add, to further squeeze a property owner in that district with this legislation just doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't, and it also doesn't seem to accomplish the goal. You know, I know that you started by wanting to have the USTs removed from the residential properties, and you made a great effort and got people to make contributions, and you had that accomplished. One of my clients over there voluntarily removed a UST from the IPA property, yeah, and has done other substantial cleanup there. But I think the real concern is that, for example, the Miller-Howard project that's ongoing right now would have been thwarted if this law was in place. The additional hurdles in place for them to expand an office building would have been substantial. They would not have been able to undertake that project, nor would IPA be able to do anything with those buildings. And those are two of the major employers in the town. And as you know, those are good citizens of Woodstock, the principals of those companies.
Well, I haven't seen them riding.
So they have asked me to come here to express their concerns about this proposal.
I have to get back to my point, which is this is a proposal which I'm sure can be improved. And that's why I brought it up for discussion. As I said at the beginning, this is a draft and I am looking for input on it.
And let's make that clear, there is no proposed action on this tonight. This is not being pushed along. This is, just as Jay said, just asked to put it up there and
No,
let's
I
hear it.
understand. And you have to understand, you know, my clients have asked me to come here tonight just to say what I'm saying, and they were so upset about the proposal after reading it themselves very carefully. And several of their employees went through this, and they would not allow me to make specific suggestions at this point to the proposal because they thought it was so overly broad that they felt it has to be restarted. And so I talked to them about the process that would happen. I know that you're just bringing this up for preliminary discussion tonight, explain that to them. But they felt that, you know, they would be willing to go along with something that makes sense to protect the aquifer, but this isn't it. And I did talk to them about the concept of making specific changes to specific existing provisions of the ZL, which the board can do. We can inject a couple of these concepts into the existing zoning law without having an entire overlay district, which really just doesn't make sense. And one of the reasons is because it already exists. nobody's gonna go over to the light industrial district. Nobody's gonna knock those buildings down. Nobody's gonna knock down any of those homes. The fact of the matter is that Woodstock is in an odd position in that it's aquifer. I'm sorry, that there was already human development over the aquifer decades ago that can't be changed.
Ron,
And which has had no impact on the aquifer from any studies that we've looked at.
is your suggestion that the entire document is not worth working?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I, Ed, we'll get to you in 1 second. I just want to interrupt and just move our agenda around a little bit. We do have Elizabeth Broad, who's the Program Manager for Energy and Climate Mountain Keeper, and she actually wanted to be at the very top of the meeting because she has to go to a subsequent meeting, and she did want to share something with the public. So we can just shift this a little bit.
I'm
Elizabeth
sorry.
Broad, and then we'll get right back to
I've
this.
never been up here before to your town hall, and I put the address I had into the GPS, and it took me on some like weird circuitous route down Tannery
You
Brook
do
Road.
that on
Anyway,
purpose.
yeah, I don't know, but luckily Kathy Nolan, my colleague at Mountain Keeper, answered her cell phone and gave me directions. So anyway, I apologize for being late, and I really appreciate you rearranging the agenda.
How do you feel about the aquifer?
You can imagine Mountain Keeper's position on that, I think. But there's so many important issues that everyone's considering now. I'm going to all these different town board meetings, and it seems like it's a really critical moment between the water bottling and the Pilgrim Pipeline, which is actually, after this, I have to go back to Kingston, which is where I live, because I'm on the CAC, and they're going to be discussing the Pilgrim Pipeline, and I'm the one who is involved with the campaign and knows about it, and so I need to be there to answer questions. So it's all of these critical things, but what I really want to be talking about, my true passion, is the solutions to all of these dire problems facing our planet, which I see top of the list is renewable energy. And so we are about to launch a campaign this spring, a Mid-Hudson Solarized campaign. I don't know if folks are familiar with Solarized. Any hands? No? Okay.
Well, I was at your meeting in Kingston.
Okay, oh, that's right. Oh, hi. So I won't bore everyone. I know there's a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, but basically the nutshell of it is that Solarize is a community marketing campaign and bulk buying campaign. So basically a community like Woodstock would decide to participate in a Solarize campaign, and then the expectation would be that folks in the community, whether it's people who are part of the board or other groups, I know Woodstock's a very active community, especially on environmental issues, the local CAC, people would basically hopefully get excited about promoting solar and host a forum in town where people would come and learn about the options for financing solar. Right now is kind of the best time ever to purchase a solar system, and for various reasons, incentives are going to be going away after this year, and they're already going down through NYSERDA. So while on one hand, solar prices will keep falling, the incentives are going to be going away. So that's why we're really looking to push this and launch as soon as possible. I was living in Binghamton this past year and launched a Solarize campaign there called Southern Tier Solar Works, and it was very successful. We doubled the number of solar systems in 2 months that they had installed the entire previous year in Broome and Tioga counties. So very different landscape. Woodstock and Ulster, there's already a lot of folks who know about solar, have solar systems compared to the Southern Tier. So we have a really big potential here, similar to what they did in Tompkins County. They did a massive Solarize campaign there, and so we're really excited to bring it here. And it basically, if people sign up in these couple of months that you do the campaign, then it's cheaper for everyone. So that's what I mean when I say it's a solar bulk buying campaign. So it's just like if you go to buy anything in bulk, it's cheaper. So it's the same principle, pretty basic, and it also really creates this person-to-person neighbor community buzz. So, you know, as Catskill Mountain Keeper, we're a nonprofit, we're not like benefiting off of this financially, but obviously we're supporting it because we're trying to support the transition, or not we're trying, we are supporting the transition to renewable energy in New York State from fossil fuels and nuclear. So just here to kind of put it on your radar, and we would love to have the town of Woodstock as one of the communities that participate in this round. We're aiming for between 3 and 6 communities in this area, including Kingston and most likely Rosendale, hopefully New Paltz. Been talking to a lot of different towns in the area and just trying to get a sense of, you know, who really wants to take this on, because while we will be dedicating staff time to it, and I do have experience facilitating this, and God willing we'll get a little bit of extra funding from NYSERDA so we can bring someone else on. But really it takes people in the community who are invested and interested and are going to be promoting it to their neighbors and acting as kind of stewards and spokespeople for solar.
So this is residential, right? This isn't just a commercial
It's mostly
aspect?
residential, but also small business. So I could imagine going up and down Main Street and talking to store owners and seeing whether they'd be interested, and also municipal buildings. We've been talking a lot about that too. So it's you know, hopefully going to jumpstart a big push in the area.
I would certainly be interested if you could leave some information.
Great.
for
Yes,
me.
I will give you my card.
Thank you very much.
And I can leave.
Do you have literature?
Jeremy? Are you Jeremy? Okay. I think I emailed you the one sheet. I thought I was going to print it, but maybe that was my mistake for the board. I should.
Okay, so that is the literature.
That's the one sheet, but I have other stuff. I unfortunately, my car broke down. I have this giant box of materials in the back of my car. I was able to borrow someone else's car to get here, but my normal box of materials I don't have. So yes, I was hoping you would have that to distribute to the board, but I can also send other information. And I can give people a website if they want to go to that. Catskill Mountain Keeper launched a new program this past year called Renewable New York, and the website is renewableny.com. And we list all of the solarized campaigns on that. You can also, including Southern Tier Solar Works, which is the campaign I mentioned that we launched this past spring. The website for that is southerntiersolarworks.org. And that is kind of a model for what we're looking to replicate here in Ulster County. Although obviously it will be different because it's a completely different part of the state, but it was a model that has worked pretty well, and Solarize has been very successful all over the country, and it's just starting to take off here in New York State. So, and I'm also happy if anybody wants to just contact me directly. It's just Betta, which is my nickname, BETTA, @CatskillMountainKeeper.org.
Yeah, I have a question. So you have this bulk buying campaign, so you're bulk buying the solar panels, but then you gotta have somebody install them. So do you have a partner? Do you have like a partner installer once you buy the bulk?
Yeah, I was trying to simplify it because I don't want to take up too much time, but yeah, a big part, like key part of the whole process is doing an RFP to installers, so which we actually didn't do with Southern Tier Solar Works because really the only game in town is like one company in Endicott, ETM Solar. But here, where there's so many companies, we're going to follow a similar model as Solar Tompkins did, which is a pretty rigorous RFP. And as the community, you can decide, do you want to preference a very local community? Do you want to offer, work with a couple of installers and maybe one's like based somewhere else, but they're cheaper, or maybe one only has, panels that are made in the United States, right? So depending on the community's values, we can customize the RFP. But I would anticipate that we're going to be working with a few installers. So that's the kind of the next phase. Right now we're in the phase of deciding which communities are on board and want to participate in this. And then once we get that determined, which I'm hoping in the next month, the one sheet I emailed you, Jeremy, had some dates that I would like to think are hard and fast, but probably aren't. But really, January we need to decide, because then we need to put the RFP out, and then decide on installers, you know, in February, and then launch the campaign at the end of March is really, I think, a good goal, and then have it run through the end of May, through like Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, and my final question is, are you involved with people that want to lease it all, or are you only doing people that want to buy?
Both. Both, yeah. So we really will, part of the campaign is to educate people about these different financing options. Because there's leases, there's loans, there's, you know, there's all these different kind of creative ways to do it. And it's very complicated. And so that's what these Solarize campaigns do, is they really simplify the process. People are able to access the information and kind of get, you know, handheld through it with a trusted community partner. So yeah, that's a big part of it.
I'm sorry, periodically you hear the commercials, if your bill is over $137 a month, you might qualify for solar energy, rebate, so forth and so on. But can I have that email address again if you don't mind?
It's Betta, B-E-T-T-A, at CatskillMountainKeeper.org.
.org or .com?
.org.
Last time you said .com.
Well, it's a little confusing because I work for CatskillMountainKeeper.org, but the campaign that we launched this past year, the website is renewableny.com. And the whole point behind renewableny.com or Renewable New York is to educate people about renewable energy, get more people involved, and showcase local groups that are working on renewable energy, and really kind of be like an aggregator of information.
Is there a phone number that would be good to contact?
I can give you my phone number. It's 607-222-3678.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Call me anytime.
One of the things we talked about at the Kingston meeting was the obstacles that people face through zoning and planning and whatever in the various towns. And I said I would talk to our building inspector about this, which I did at one of our budget hearings. We went through this. And Woodstock has passed the standard solar, well, I don't know, it's the
expedited standard solar.
The expedited standard solar. The building inspector said there's no problem installing solar in Woodstock. You know, we're very cooperative. The contractors have said the same thing. And the assessor said, you know, we don't put solar into the assessment. We consider it a neutral type of improvement. So I think, you know, we're pretty well set up as far as eliminating those objections. If there are more, I think we'd be all willing to consider that. From a viewpoint of promoting renewables, I think we've taken a broader approach. I mean, the Environmental Commission has run education seminars on solar, on wind, on geothermal, and some of the other technologies, and sort of taken, you know, not just promoting solar, but promoting a range of things. We're right now involved with a joint effort with RUPCO and a group called Transition Woodstock to promote energy efficiency in the NYSERDA program. And that was a community outreach approach, you know, neighbor to neighbor. I have to say though, it's a little hard to keep the momentum up on those sorts of efforts. And we had a start, and people are doing this, but you know, it takes a reasonable amount of regeneration every few months to keep it really going at a high pitch, and it's a lot of work.
Absolutely, and I'm so sorry, I forgot your name.
Ken Panza.
Ken Panza, of course, okay. Right. I just moved here this past year, so I'm still wrapping my head around all of the great green mover shakers, but of course,
So
yes,
I'm not in that category.
yes, you are, and thank you so much for coming to our Kingston meeting. And I think Mike Darcy from RUPCO was also at that meeting,
Yes, he was.
and I should have mentioned this before, but we really see that the promotion of energy efficiency is just as important as solar and renewables, and in many ways that's the first step. It doesn't make sense to slap a big, solar system on your house if you haven't first insulated it, and because you don't even know then what type of energy needs you might really have once you do that. So we're definitely partnering with RUPCO and encouraging energy efficiency at all of the workshops we'll be doing in our outreach, and that's the first thing we say is, reduce your load. But I also hear you about maintaining the excitement and keeping the campaign juices flowing, but I think that's what's kind of nice about these solarized campaigns, because they are a limited time. So you don't feel like, you know, if you're a volunteer and you're like many of us that are already doing way too much, you know, stretched thin, you don't want to commit to something that's going to be another like year thing. This really is, you know, it's a couple of months of the campaign, and then, you know, a couple of months leading up to it where we're just planning. But it's really not that big of a commitment to get involved. So I'm really hoping that Woodstock will be one of the communities. I think it makes perfect sense. And I'm available for any other questions.
I have a question. How is your record so far with dealing with NYSERDA and the block incentives they're giving out? Have you received any so far? Have you gotten them up in Binghamton?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And have you gotten any in this area? And because there's limited time now there. As you say, they're giving less money out now, and eventually they're going to stop it.
Right.
So how is your track record with that?
Well, the installers that we partner with, they have that expertise of working with NYSERDA. And so the solar installer that we worked with in Binghamton, pretty much every system was taking into account that the people were going to get those NYSERDA tax rebates. So that's just, you know.
So you do it through the installer?
Yeah, and that's a big part of all of this, because otherwise it would be a lot more expensive. And so we're definitely all about working with NYSERDA, and we're actually waiting right now to hear about a grant from NYSERDA that we're hoping is going to help, you know, fund this campaign. Because right now it's like a little tricky, running around doing all these things. But yeah, we're definitely trying to take advantage as much as possible of the, you know, the money that NYSERDA has allocated to this. And they also actually have a new grant program for communities to promote Solarize that we're also potentially going to be tapping into. So I will say that the Cuomo administration has, you know, put a lot of money into promoting solar and renewables, and there's a lot of different programs and opportunities that we can tap into, which is pretty great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Great to see you, Ken.
Ed, you had something to say about the previous issue on the table?
Well, I followed this aquifer protection overlay district issue ever since Stephen Winkley of the New York Rural Water Association proposed it. And I think the town zoning law has a number of overlay districts. The scenic overlay, the hamlet, the preservation, the gateway overlay. So having an overlay district is not a big deal. I further think that the water issue, which we're dealing with at the top of our mountain there, up in Lake Hill, leads into the need for this aquifer protection overlay district. Water is the new gold. And one of the, I agree with the gentleman that it is has clunky sections that it could be stripped down. For instance, one prohibition in the draft that Jay has is there's no commercial bottling operation allowed in the overlay district. So I think that's extremely important. We've seen what a big Niagara, California company is. I research water districts in Connecticut and New Hampshire. There's this big Australian company, Aquarium, that's buying up a lot of, and Nestle's, Poland Spring, they're all looking for water. Water, it costs more for a gallon of bottled water than it does a gallon of gas. So water is definitely our goal. And these buildings on the Bearsville Flats are fine. They need to be cultivated and encouraged in business. You know, everybody's got to earn a living. But the aquifer underneath it is 11,000-year-old glacial till that the last glacier left when it receded. And it's totally precious. And so we need to get Woodstockers to come up with good draft, a non-police state, but real world. For instance, preventing commercial bottling, but also preventing the dumping into the aquifer of pesticides. And if we have research facilities that they use state-of-the-art recycling for anything hazardous used by a business. And so that can all be, I mean, I just went on the internet and I pulled out 2 aquifer protection districts, one in Ayer, Massachusetts, and the one in Wyndham, New Hampshire, that are, you know, they could be a prototype. In other words, the internet is full of aquifer protection districts. Anyway, so that's my opinion.
And also, just to follow up, I was starting to finish, and this gentleman leading me into, what we really need, if you really want to protect the aquifer, the real issues are always its containment, if there are hazmats being used in the area, and prohibiting any subsurface activities. That's really where you get to the nitty-gritty of potential issues. But this particular proposal, a lot of this has issues that have to do with merely renovating existing buildings, which would be prohibited, where we would have to go before the planning board. We automatically would be put in a position of having to use a long form EAF rather than the short form, where otherwise would it be necessitated under the existing zoning law. There's provisions in here where all development affecting more than 1/4 acre or requiring the placement or removal of more than 50 cubic yards of material, which is really nothing, in the back of your car. Or any substantial improvement of the structure within the aquifer overlay district would conform to the following standards. One thing that would be required is all drainage from impermeable surfaces, except driveways or anything having to do with the residence. We'd have to put together a stormwater management plan, which is enormously expensive to do. Why wouldn't the residential property owners be subjected to that same requirement? It makes no sense. So I think those are some of the things that are the objections, and I agree with some of the points of this gentleman, because it really leads into the concept of what is really trying to be accomplished. If it's to protect the water in the aquifer underneath the surface, certainly a prohibition against any subsurface development is warranted. You know, the old factory owners were dumping things into the ground. That's something that could be prohibited, and it would make perfect sense, and that the existing property owners could all live with, because there's no intention of doing that. That would never happen in the future. Or something having to do, or anything having to do with containment. And, you know, that's really where the issue is. So in other words, let's say you have an industrial property owner there, and they're doing something that requires a cleaning solvent, let's say. Well, they would certainly not be allowed, under current regulations, state and federal regulations, they're not allowed to dump it anymore, like they used to be able to. You're not allowed to do that anyway. But if the town wanted to come up with legislation that would further restrict that, that might make sense, because that's really where the danger is. Any hazmats cannot be released into the ground. They have to be contained and taken off of the property properly, in accordance with current federal and state requirements for hauling hazmats. And that would make sense, although I think that there are sufficient requirements already.
Well, I'm glad that you agree that this draft can be improved.
It can be stripped down substantially. I think the direction should go to the things that really might happen in Woodstock's aquifer district, not things that were in some form drafted by someone else that really don't apply to the realities that we face with an existing residential community there, an existing light industrial district there. And you know, those buildings sat idle for well over a decade, and then they were purchased by local business people. And then 6 months later, this thing surfaced, and you can understand their opposition to it and their concerns, because it goes way beyond the scope of the regulations that they thought they were going to be subjected to that were reviewed before they bought the properties. They looked at the Woodstock zoning law, they looked at the light industrial law, and said, okay, we can live with this. And then a few months after closing on these properties, this thing came out of someone's drawer, and this goes right to the heart of what they're trying to do, which is to improve the light industrial district, to rebuild it, to renovate those buildings. This really ties their hands. They can't do that without going in front of the planning board with much more substantial hurdles to overcome. But if it was a law that provided, first of all, no one should be drawing water from any natural source for bottling purposes. We are all totally opposed to that. That's outrageous. Whether it's in the aquifer or if it's at Cooper Lake, that's not what's happening here. We're not tapping it. There's nothing to do with what is going on there with the commercial property owners there. It's a restaurant, it's an office building, and 2 industrial type buildings are there. And this really freezes what they can do in terms of future development over there or future improvements. And but if it's something that has to do with prohibition of subsurface activities, which I would never engage in, fine. Containment, that's really how you protect the aquifer.
I'm just curious, is it because they're going to be extending the building?
Well,
They want to grow that business, they want to grow IPA.
The planning board already approved the expansion of one of the buildings there. There's an office building there that's already being expanded.
I know the building because I used to work in there.
Okay, and
so I'm very aware of
yeah.
the building.
So that expansion was approved, that's underway. That's going to be an expansion of existing office building.
I think you guys should focus on us, not each other.
And
actually, I'd like to say a few things, if we could open up to the board for a couple of minutes. I don't disagree with what both Ed and Ron kind of touched on. And I think Jeremy and I talked a little about it way back when. You know, there are a lot of things here that are just outright prohibited. And I think, Ed, did you mention research laboratory? Well, what the hell? I mean, that's pretty vague and pretty...
I had some comments about that.
Pretty broad. And I think if we kind of focused more on containing and making sure the containment was done properly and recycling and whatnot, that could go a long way to achieving what we're trying to do here without forcing everybody not to do certain things.
Absolutely.
The other thing that, and Ed, you hit on it a little bit, you talked about having an overlay district, and I'm not sure I think that's the best approach. Because what about my aquifer up in Shady? You know, we're protecting water for 700 people in town, and that's a good thing. But there's a lot of other people that aren't getting that protection. And furthermore, if we ever need that water from Mink Hollow, we want to make sure that that's equally protected.
And that's why you put a provision in the entire ZL. You don't just make it a single overlay district. It should apply to every zoning district.
These can be things that the planning board automatically, and I saw you shaking your head before. I think it was when Ron was talking about, you know, the planning board already has...
Increased cost. He's 100% correct about increased cost. If we think something's complex enough to bring in a planner, the cost goes to the applicant. He's 100% correct.
But
the additional complexity will cost the applicant more because you bring in a planner, they pay for it.
But he was also when he was talking about specifically that the planning board has the ability to look at some of these things. And I wasn't sure if you were agreeing or disagreeing.
I wasn't sure, you know, I would have to go myself and reread the current law to see, is all this necessary, or is some of it already still there?
Right. Well, for example, with this current development, you required us to hire an engineer at great cost to do the drainage plans. We had to come up with a drainage system that was acceptable to the planning board. That was at substantial cost.
And even without this, your point is even without this,
right, under the existing site plan requirements, we were required to put in a specialized drainage system with a filtering system for the parking lot drains to filter out any contaminants from parked automobiles, so on and so
And you
forth.
guys are totally on town water there, both those projects, right?
On what?
Both those properties are on town water.
I think we're on town water, but we have our own, it's septic.
Yeah.
It's our own septic.
Okay, they
Yeah,
don't
it's not
have their
town
own
sewer, it's
well.
town water out.
Yeah, I think it's town water, yes.
But you're at,
So
And
you
by the way, we're putting in an entirely new septic system on top of everything. So, and we were required to do this based on the existing county health department requirements. We had to put in we're putting in a new septic system for the building. So I think my point is simply that the existing environmental laws, the existing health department laws in Ulster County, and the oversight of the Ulster County Health Department with respect to the septic system that we had to install there is pretty substantial already. And you know, I think that I can speak for my clients that they're all very interested in protecting the aquifer, and they're doing everything they can on their own to do that in what they're doing in terms of their business operations there. But they also, they wanted to stay in Woodstock, and those were the only commercial lots available to them to build their businesses. They thought that would be better to go into an area where there were existing buildings and take them over than try to buy a large piece of vacant land somewhere in Woodstock and start anew. Because, you know, under the existing zoning law, you can create new light industrial districts. There's an entire provision in the existing zoning law for that, sort of like spot light industrial
That's
districts.
where the IDA is.
Exactly. But we decided to stay in the existing light industrial district, improve it, rebuild those buildings, bring local people in to work there. Those are some of the best jobs in town, those companies, and including the Gypsy Wolf, which is also now owned by my client. So, and that's going to continue there. So we just don't want something to just implement the law because it sounds good, it feels good, when it doesn't have an appropriate balance or appropriate application to Woodstock, New York.
So let me ask you, Jay. Okay, go ahead.
Ron, my intent, and I'm sure no one's intent here, is to make life difficult for one group of people. Our intent is to make life better for everybody. And I hope that you can not worry that your clients, for instance, are going to be come down hard on. That won't happen. And I just wanted to say to Bill that the water of the all our water sources are crucial to me.
Yeah.
And I want to address all of that.
That's why I was thinking that, you know, maybe it shouldn't be an overlay, it should just be in the zoning law.
Whatever will work best,
Yeah.
whatever.
Do you remember that it was probably 2-3 years ago, I worked for 6 months on creating a gateway overlay district. That, remember, we spent a long time on that, trying to figure out how to create some certain restrictions over various types of districts. It turned into a real difficult situation for the town law, and we decided to abandon that. And I see this creating very similar problems, having this whole overlay. So again, I would like to see whatever corrections we need to the zoning law to look at that and have that be put into our law without creating an overlay district. I thought last time it just got more and more complicated and more created more havoc with our laws, and so I would like to see this done in a differently than an overlay district.
I was going to suggest, Jay, before that maybe the next step is for you to form a committee, a group, and I would suggest that, you know, 1 or 2 of the applicants be on it, just so that they can speak from that side of the table. Somebody from the planning board. Where'd Ed go? Maybe Ed would be interested. I know he's
left before you could
Did he
nominate.
leave? No, I see his jacket. We want you, Ed.
I agree absolutely. That's what I was hoping to be one of the things that comes out of this.
And the only thing I would strongly urge, because I know it's a little bit of an issue, it's a big issue with the wetlands, is that either have the building inspector on the committee, or at least involve them to let her read the draft, because enforcement is key here. You can write the most wonderful
Exactly.
law in the world. We just put you on a committee, Ed. Anyway, that's, I don't know what the rest of the
And that,
board
you hit
is.
the nail on it, by the way, and what I would also encourage is that if you're making laws like this. to
We're not gonna
help-
make a law
No, no,
like
no,
this.
but dealing with water, we have the wetlands law, the watercourse laws, to really help the people who have to enforce the law, to enforce it
Yeah.
equally townwide. It's easy to, well, it's not easy, but you can make a law, and all of us will be long gone when other people
I
in
try
the
to
future
figure
have to
out.
enforce it.
Right.
So they need something that's really well drafted and solid, that connects the dots with the rest of the zoning law, so you can make sense and cross-reference it with the other provisions. And then you need a mechanism for enforcing the laws.
Just for the record, Ron, I was not on the board when they passed the wetlands, and I can remember standing up at the public hearing and saying, how is this law gonna be enforced? And the
Yeah.
response from one of the council people was, Paul will figure it out.
Yeah,
Paul will
well,
figure it out.
yeah, when your zoning law starts expanding, you really need, you need a team, a mechanism for
Yeah.
enforcing it, so that it really works, and that you're getting the benefit of the legislation.
Right.
It's not just theoretical or academic, it's actually working.
So, is the idea, hold on, let me just, before I lose this thought. So are we contemplating a sort of an informal little task force here to work? Ed, would you be willing to help us with that?
Yes.
I'm just speaking for myself, I don't want to exclude the possibility of an overlay. And just for, and I'm not saying that I'm embracing an overlay, but we do have that Horsley written report that does describe a very specific recharge area, which is right over these buildings and all. I'm not suggesting that what we have here, be necessarily the thing advanced, but I don't want to exclude. I'd like to see this legislations that Ed has dug up from other communities, because perhaps there is a model there that would be more suitable to ours. So I'm not saying that I'm insisting on an overlay, but I don't want to necessarily just abandon the concept of it, especially in that very small and restricted recharge area, which we may have to treat a little bit more delicately than other areas, but not to a point where we're going to frighten off the businesses, because I do agree with you. There is a lot of current state, county, local regulation that I think heads off much of the concern that we have with the overlay. I was a little distressed to find out that you described the planning board's review of the Miller-Howard application as merely sufficient and not torturous. That's all gone.
We didn't do our job.
So, but I'll have my conversation with the planning board about that.
It's never fun going through that, but the planning board did a great job, and they had a very good planner, and we brought a good team to the table too, so we were able to,
Yes,
to follow the law
yeah,
and to do what we were supposed to do
yeah.
without too much.
Everybody that I
arguing.
talked to seemed to be very satisfied.
Who was planning on that, Laura?
It wasn't Matt, was it?
It was Rudicoff.
It was Matt, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very good, but both planners are very good. I think we have 3 actually, but I think I've met 2 of them. And the 2
So
of them.
Ron, I mean, would you be willing to give some of your time toward this? If
Yeah.
you promise not to make it horrible?
Yeah.
Ed, would you be willing to
Well,
help us?
I'm very happy. I don't know whether we should let Tom choose who wants to plan board, but I'd certainly quickly volunteer. So
Or why don't you volunteer yourself to him?
Well, there you go.
I can't think of 2 better people than Ed and Ron.
Yeah, I think it would
As
be.
far as knowledge of the zoning law and having worked through the details of it and struggled with it and.
Can I just ask one question? I grew up in that area for many years. Now, there's never been any problem with the soil or anything going into the water in that area, right?
To date, no.
To date, well, I have to say, years ago, they were very loose with what they put in the ground over there, between Rotron and the dry cleaner and the swimming pool and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
So, really, just doing some sort of regulation, I can't see that property being
And, yeah, City Lights was its own,
There,
one little,
my father worked over at Rotron, there was,
was Rotron out there too?
yes.
Yeah, they built those
Yeah,
buildings.
and certainly since the 1970s, you know, there's been so much environmental law implemented that you can't do the things that they might have been doing back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s today. You can't do it.
Our water was more affected by the infrastructure the town put in than anything else.
So just
Years ago.
to back up a little bit, I won't not support this if it comes back in overlay. I guess my thoughts were that what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it should be, must be, but I just don't want to, I don't want to just take that off the table
Right.
either.
But I mean, it wouldn't necessarily change the law, the content, would it?
No. No, I think that in the process, maybe there would be some very specific issues, you know.
Within.
Within that area, that gee whiz, maybe there is a specific use that we want to prohibit in these areas.
You also have to understand, I think Western Woodstock is also regulated by the DEP, which has its own set of rules and regulations.
Well, we could create the district, the overlay district with regard to uses, that I don't have a problem
Yeah, well,
with.
that's mostly what I was thinking about.
But I'm thinking about, you know, the requirements
Right.
of the law should apply to one, should apply to all.
Mhm.
I guess that's where I was going with.
And we can make things tighter.
So actually, I would say yes, that, I guess there should be an overlay district with regard to the uses.
Well, I wasn't thinking of overlay or not overlay.
Right.
I was looking to charge ahead with getting input on this,
Right.
getting some direction, some ideas, and proceeding.
Yeah, well, now you gotta.
You got it.
You got it.
Yeah.
So Ed, can you email me those, what you found online? Just so I've got an idea what you're
And
talking about?
one caveat for me, I can't say I can be involved in any way in any committee until I vet it out in my head, whether that's okay for me to do it, because I don't want to compromise my
Right.
representation.
Yes.
Well, listen, what I would say to you is to just go back to the
One of
two
the-
clients
they might
and tell
want to-
them, we would like some participation
Exactly.
from them. Be it you or the two of them,
Or
whatever.
someone from one of the companies,
Yeah.
both of them,
Yeah, exactly.
sit on.
I mean, they've gone through the process, they may go through it in the future. It'd be good to have that input.
And they have you to advise them.
Right,
Yes.
so they would know exactly what was going on, from, you know, rather
Yeah.
than just hearsay.
Well,
But if I can help in any way, I will.
So, but
volunteer to do that.
you'll deliver that to the both of them and have them
Yes.
get in touch.
Hey, I'm sorry, I have it. Here it is.
yeah.
You gave it to me,
Yeah.
okay.
I no longer have, because of my computer, I no longer have your email. Could you please send it to me?
Yes.
And Laura also, please.
jwank1@gmail.com.
It was jwank1?
Is this wrapping up soon?
It had one.
No, I'm asking a question, because I just want, I want to know what the status is with Cooper Lake. I know everybody's hypersensitive about it, what's going on with it, is it gonna happen, is it not?
Is what gonna happen?
Well, can I?
Is Niagara gonna pump 2 million gallons out of there every day?
I think we're still on the other topic,
Oh,
sorry.
I thought we were
Wait,
done, I'm sorry.
So we've got Jay, Ed, Laura, somebody, so that's 4.
Should be
You know,
enough heads.
you wanna be
Are
on
you
the line?
No, I
volunteering?
want to say something.
Say something.
Don't tell me
You're
it's
another
just a
expert
spelling
on zoning.
error.
Oh, well, yes, of
Don't
course.
even go there, this is a draft.
No,
And the building inspector, Jay.
my
Jay.
The building.
Let's
My
have the
question
building
is,
inspector.
if you do an overlay, then the numbering is all wrong, so you gotta correct all that. Put things in the wrong place. So if it ever becomes an overlay, then Jay, I'll get with you, gotta change some of those numbers.
Will it get you to
It's a
number it?
long way off.
How's that?
Way off.
What?
Wait.
Can you number it for us when it's all done?
Oh, yeah, you put things in the wrong sections. So anyway, but my other comment after listening to Ron about his clients and I mean, obviously wants to protect his clients. And in the beginning said, well, scrap the whole thing. And so my concern is that you know, that we might lean towards appeasing, you know, these business people in lieu of, and I think our priority should be first about protecting the water, not about appeasing the clients. And so if it makes it a little difficult for them, well, so be it.
Or any other citizens.
Yeah, that's what Ron was saying, just that it's not including everybody, it's only including a select few.
The one thing I
and
would, point out, Iris, is that, remember that in this day of litigation, Ron's clients are keenly aware of that as well, and are gonna wanna make sure that there's protections on their end, that they don't get in trouble. I mean, anybody can sue them.
I think I'm not quite saying, look, you know, everybody's always gonna try to protect themselves. So it's not just those businesses. And it's not just, get rid of the concept of protecting the aquifer, area. That's not what I'm saying at all. Everyone wants to do that, including my clients, and they have specifically stated that. What I'm saying is that this specific proposal doesn't really accomplish that. If you, on balance, it really hurts the existing property owners, especially commercial owners, more than it really achieves its goal. So if we can come up with legislation that achieves that goal, and another thing, and even what Jackie pointed out, is that, you know, a lot of the concerns go back in the past. And again, one thing I just want to reiterate, to be conscious of, is that there are substantial protections in place, that none of these businesses right now are doing anything whatsoever to affect the aquifer, and there's no plans to do that in the future. I think our opposition to the proposal was just that it seemed to prevent them from doing things that were sort of ordinary to a business, and it didn't really seem to be doing anything to add any additional protections to the aquifer other than what already exists. So, and again, I would just repeat that the areas where, from my experience with this issue, where you really want to focus on and layer a new law maybe on top of existing laws, is there anything that we can do with respect to ensuring there's always proper containment? Can we prohibit any subsurface activities, whether it be dry wells or anything else, which are now already outlawed under state and federal law? So those are the areas where you can make improvements. And again, it really should be town-wide, because we're part of the watershed. So that water is coming from everywhere in the town and feeding into the aquifer. It's not just the businesses sitting on top of it.
Well, I feel very good about this evening.
Yeah, I do.
I got what I was looking for, which was feedback and directions. And we have a committee want to take this further. And I'd also like to say that one of Ron's clients made a very significant donation to getting the buried fuel tanks out of the ground over the aquifer. So you're not all bad.
Right, and we also voluntarily removed one that we discovered before the property was purchased.
Right.
At their own cost.
That was discovered by chance.
Yes. And
The
we.
town discovered one the same way.
Pardon?
The
Yeah.
town discovered this one the same
Oh,
way.
We don't want to discover any more of those.
Well, under more serious
Yes, sir.
circumstances.
Well, it distresses me that the planning board only did a sufficient job.
And not torturous.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Jay.
Let's go.
Can I just mention one thing quick? Tax bills?
Yes, do mention.
Yes, we brought it up at a meeting with the State Regional Town Clerks Association, so they're gonna do some further work as far as contacting federal agencies. But just so that everyone knows, your tax bill will be coming out January 1. If you haven't received it by January 10, please contact the office. Taxes don't go away if you don't receive the bill. So if you don't receive your bill by January 10th, please contact me and we will certainly forward you a bill.
You know, Jackie, I'm gonna put that on our website, and I'm gonna put it on our Facebook page.
Yeah, but Western New York apparently is getting creamed with bad mail service
I
also.
got
There's-
a letter yesterday for someone addressed in Walk Hill. And a couple of days ago, I got addressed, mailed to someone that was on Plaquemine Lane.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, and I wonder where my mail is going.
Well, you know what they have found out, what they
It's
have,
56.
what they have found is that the post
that
office
right?
is not hiring employees now, everything's being subcontracted out, so a lot of them, and they're not giving them full-time. So people are being hired part-time, they're being paid substandard wages, they don't give a crap, to put it mildly, and they have been finding mail just tossed. Instead of like, okay, this is the mail I have to deliver today, well, I'm not gonna mail it, and it's been tossed. So it's really, the postal service is in bad, bad shape, and it's not just New York State, it's all over, but we're really seeing the crunch.
Question here?
He's not put us.
Yes.
He's not put us.
Could you let me know in the letter that I sent to the previous supervisor rises?
Wasn't put in time.
What was the top?
What was
You're
that?
happy to. Is that it, everybody? Move to adjourn?
Why not?